We all have heard the word we all have heard the word mindfulness, but what is it really all about and does it work? And if so, how? Well, if that's what you're interested in, welcome to this session. Hi, welcome to the School of Becoming, where we support you in your professional development. My name is Ingo Raut, and I had the pleasure to work with an amazing team of supporters, advisors, as well as with my colleague Lauren Goostrey on developing this program on mindfulness, which is also supported by Managed Magazine. We created this program on mindfulness inspired by the challenging times that we all live in and go through right now. And our idea was to support you with not only understanding mindfulness, but also finding your way into mindfulness and practicing mindfulness in a way that is relevant for you, no matter if it's in terms of parenting or work or in terms of your mental health. We will address all these topics in the program. Today's guest is Diana Winston, and Diana is the director of mindfulness education at UCLA's Mindfulness Awareness Research Center, or MARC for short. She has more than 30 years experience in practicing mindfulness and over 20 years of experience in researching and teaching mindfulness, not only to people like you and me, but also to educators that educate others in mindfulness. She has published quite a lot on the topic, but most importantly, recently released 2 books. The first one entitled The Little Book of Being, Practices and Guidance for Uncovering Your Natural Awareness. The second book she co-authored with Susan Semelli on the topic of being fully present, the art, the science, and practice of mindfulness. Having taught mindfulness since 1999 and being named as one of the nation's most known mindfulness teachers, I couldn't think of anyone better to introduce us to this topic of mindfulness. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm happy to do this. Happy to share with you. I call this Introduction to Mindfulness for Reducing Stress and Increasing Well-Being in Challenging Times. And I was asked to really kind of overview what mindfulness was as this series begins, because I think that as I've been teaching for so many years, teaching mindfulness in all sorts of contexts around the world, it's really been my pleasure to think about ways of making mindfulness really accessible to people of all backgrounds, of all, just from all over. And so I wanted to offer this for you. I define mindfulness as paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. So there are lots of different definitions for mindfulness. This is the one I like, and we'll look at it more closely. It's really about how can we live in the present moment, not lost in the past or the future, which is what we tend to be doing, which is where anxiety and depression tends to lie, and all sorts of difficult, challenging emotions. So, but we'll go back and we'll revisit that in a little while. So mindfulness comes to us from the ancient traditions in the Buddhist world, and it has since gone from the Buddhist world into mainstream. And this was a cover of Time magazine, I think 2013, but it's been astounding for me. I actually started meditating 30 years ago. And when I was meditating, when I first encountered mindfulness, there were, it was kind of considered like this alternative, slightly fringy thing that people did. Of course, not if you were living in these Buddhist countries, but in the United States. And it was, you can imagine my shock to see the interest and the scope of mindfulness these days, which has really, really grown, so much so that even Don Draper on Mad Men was meditating, if you ever saw that TV show. So mindfulness has now entered many, many sectors of society. There's mindfulness in the workplace. There's Fortune 500 companies that bring it. Google has a whole mindfulness program called Search Inside Yourself. It's in small businesses, large businesses. It's in education, many, many programs throughout the country in school systems. So in education, it's a combination of things. It's teachers who have been practicing mindfulness who then are kind of sharing it in their schools, just in a very sort of bottom-up way, like not any type of program, but just they love it and they want to teach the kids. And there's a whole bunch of programs that are including programs that are citywide or county-wide, where they're bringing mindfulness into the schools in a completely secular way in order to help reduce, in order to bring more social and emotional understanding, in order to help with attention, in order to help with different skills for in terms of emotional regulation. It's in higher education, so we have it at UCLA through our center, but in many, many centers across the United States, it's being brought into college campuses, into law, first responders, emergency personnel. So this is really exciting. It's something that's really, really helpful right now for people who are on the front lines. It's being taught in psychology schools and being incorporated into mental health programs, healthcare. I'm located at the UCLA, in the medical school at UCLA, so we're right in the center of being able to offer it to patients and staff. So as you practice mindfulness, there's lots of potential benefits of reducing stress and anxiety, improving attention, cultivating self-awareness and self-regulation. It can improve relationships, and we'll talk some about how that might be possible. And it's a really helpful self-care tool. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge this time that we're living in. This is a tremendously challenging moment in human history. And if you are one of many people who is suffering from anxiety, depression, from just a sense of overwhelm, uncertainty, because of the pandemic, because of the economic crisis, because of the global climate crisis, all of these things, the crisis of racial justice, it is a crazy time to be alive right now. And so if you're having all sorts of feelings and challenges, it's normal. It's normal. It's appropriate that you're having these responses. And here is a tool among many tools that may be helpful for you. So that's the spirit in which I offer this. So I want to switch to talking some about the science behind mindfulness. And I think you will, over the course of this series, have more extensive, deeper dive into the research behind mindfulness. But I want to give you some of it. So you can see that mindfulness is helpful with different types of things like chronic pain, insomnia, cardiovascular health. It's helpful for anxiety and depression. It can impact our attention. And I'll talk about the different studies that I like. I want to share a few studies with you, and you can get a sense of how it's been impacting our body and mind. So mindfulness, there's a good body of research looking at the impact of mindfulness on our physical health, particularly on stress-related conditions. There's quite a bit. I think the most robust research looks at chronic pain and how mindfulness can be helpful for that. But there's this research study that I'm kind of pointing to with this is mindfulness can positively impact the genetic markers for inflammation. So inflammation is our body's response to stress. It's an appropriate response to stress. There's inflammation to help the body heal. But chronic inflammation, living under stressful conditions over a long period of time, when unchecked, can lead to a host of diseases. So these are some of them that are mentioned there. Mindfulness, as I said, can positively impact the genetic markers for stress. And it's been very exciting to see the way that mindfulness is helpful with stress-related conditions, and particularly looking at the immune response. So under stress, our cortisol levels rise, there's an inflammatory response, and our immune response declines, right? It decreases. But when we begin to do practices like meditation, it doesn't have to be mindfulness. There's many types of meditation. Mindfulness is my focus, and I'll say more about that in a little while. But with meditation, cortisol decreases, the inflammatory response decreases, and our immune response increases. And we know we all want a healthy immune system these days. So for an example, this is an early study done looking at people with psoriasis. Psoriasis is that itchy skin condition that is stress related. What they did was the treatment, as you can see, is like a tanning, almost like a tanning bed, but it's UVB rays on the skin to treat the psoriasis. They had some people do a meditate along with this, along with the treatment, and some people just did the treatment as usual. What they found were the people who meditated, listening to an audio while getting the treatment, their skin healed twice as fast. So it cleared up in 30 days as opposed to 60 days with the control group. So, this is exciting to think about the relationship between body and mind, the relationship between stress reduction and how it can impact our physical body. Mindfulness is also helpful for mental health related concerns. So, um, I mentioned earlier anxiety and depression, which so many of us struggle with these days. Because it's helpful, it's been incorporated into a variety of clinical treatments. So there's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which is for depression, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is for anxiety and depression, dialectical behavioral therapy. I'm just mentioning a few. That one is for borderline personality disorder. You don't have to have a particular diagnosis to do mindfulness. In fact, the garden variety, I'm anxious because it's 2020. Mindfulness is really helpful for that. So here's a study looking at the sense of well-being. How does mindfulness impact our well-being? And this was a study done with 2,500 people all around the world who were buzzed on their smartphones at random intervals, and they were asked 3 questions. And those questions were, as you can see, what are you doing? Is your mind on it? And how is your mood? So they compiled all of that data from the 2,500 people, and here's the first thing they learned. Almost 50% of the time, we are not in the present moment. We are lost in the past or lost in the future. But does that sound right? Maybe like half the time, if you were to kind of notice, oh, I'm really, really thinking about things that are not happening in this moment. Now, it's interesting because where do we go? What happens when we're not in the present moment? So, this is what the research looked at. What they saw was that we tend to go to pleasant things, unpleasant things, or neutral things. So, if you're going to something pleasant, if you're not in the present moment, you're thinking about something pleasant, like, oh, I had a great meal last night, I really loved that, people report happy. But if your mind goes to unpleasant or neutral, meaning neither pleasant nor unpleasant, people report being unhappy. So 2/3 of the time, people tend to have ruminations that lead to unhappiness. What this research study showed us was that if people brought their attention into the present moment, that they reported more happiness. So even if they were doing things they didn't like, they reported being happier if they were in the present moment. So let's say you don't like to wash the dishes, and you wash the dishes sitting there stressing out about how much you don't like washing the dishes, or thinking about negative things like, oh, I have a big project coming up at work, I'll never get it done. People report being unhappy. If you come into the present moment and just notice what's happening, feel your feet on the floor, feel your hands as you wash the dishes, staying fully present, people report being happier. So mindfulness is also helpful for attention, and this is a study that we did at UCLA about a number of years ago, looking at adolescents and adults with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or attention deficit disorder. What we found was that, and this was both kids and adults, after going through an 8-week mindfulness protocol, was a significant improvement in one aspect of attention. So there's many aspects of attention, well, actually 3 main ones, but the one that was the most important for this study is called conflict attention. Conflict attention is when you're trying to focus on one thing and something is competing for your attention. So if you were to focus on my hand right now, but I would do that, you would get distracted, right? People with ADD get really distracted. They just completely lose sight of the hand. When they practice mindfulness, that ability to stay focused on one thing improved significantly. So much so that the scientists looked at the data and they said, so what medication did you put them on? And we said, no, it was meditation with a T, not a C. Okay. This study was interesting. It was done with advanced meditators. So, advanced meditators are the people who have been living in caves for 30 years practicing meditation. We can kind of think of them as the Olympic athletes of meditation. But this was one of the early neuroscience studies done looking at the impact of mindfulness on the brain. And there's been many things since. So, what they did was they looked at certain parts of the brain and compared it to people of the same age range. I don't know if you know this, but as you age, your brain thins out. And now, if you want something else to worry about, there it is. It's called age related cortical decline. However, in the advanced meditators, in two particular areas, which are up on the slides, the brain did not thin out. One area was the insular cortex, and one is the prefrontal cortex. I want to focus on the prefrontal cortex, which is this one, because this is really significant. And you can see this axis is thickness, right? This is thickness, and this is age. So in the red is the control. The red, they thin out over time. But the meditators, the blue, you can see did not thin out over time, even thickened over time. What is the prefrontal cortex? The prefrontal cortex is what we think of as the CEO of our brain. It's responsible for executive functioning, for delayed gratification, for working memory, flexible thinking, impulse control. All of that is associated with that part of the brain, although of course it's in other areas as well. So in the advanced meditators, this did not thin out. It stayed robust, and that's what you want. You want a thick prefrontal cortex. But you're probably thinking, okay, so what? These were people who had been meditating for 30 years. How does this relate to me? Another study in 2011 looked at novice meditators who over 8 weeks studied mindfulness, practiced it, an average of 27 minutes a day, and found changes in their brains in similar areas, as you can see mentioned here. So that's really exciting. Even in a small amount of time, our brains can change. And this is because of what's called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the idea that our brains develop over time depending on what we do with them. Scientists for many years, until I don't know, 20 years ago, used to think that our brains stopped developing when we were about 25. What they realize now is our brains continue to create new neural pathways over time, depending on what we do with our brain. So it's constantly developing new neural pathways. And that's why older people are encouraged to do things like, puzzles and keeping their brain alive and alert and active. However, anybody's brain can change at any time. And so if you want to develop something, let's say you think, oh, I'm not a person who has a very good attention span. You actually can work with your brain and change it in the direction of better attention. Last study I wanted to mention, just because we recently published it at UCLA and it's sort of interesting and fun, was an altruism study. So they did it with video game players in a game that where people were giving away money. Okay. And so they had, like you say, 300 subjects, 326 subjects, and some of them got a mindfulness meditation. It was just listening to a meditation. And some of them just played the game. The mindfulness group was more generous. They donated it more than 2.5 times the control group. So mindfulness can lead to more compassion, kindness, caring for others, and here in this case, more altruism. So I've just put up some slides sharing some of the research that we've done at UCLA. We've done some work with children, looking at elementary school children. We've done a big study looking at sleep quality in older adults and how it positively impacts insomnia symptoms. We've done some studies for breast cancer survivors and helping with the quality of life. Here's a study comparing differential effects between Latino and non-Latino population related to stress, and that is showed actually no difference. Mindfulness for Alzheimer's caregivers, for pediatric residents, and more studies that we're doing at UCLA. Okay, so I'm going to pause on the science for now and jump back into what is mindfulness. And then we're going to have an experiential. So I'm giving you a whole lead up to actually doing the practice so you know what we're going to be practicing. Mindfulness, paying attention to present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. Much of the time, we're lost in the past or the future. So if you were to check into your mind at any point in the day, you might notice you're thinking about something that happened, replaying it, thinking, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Going over it. Or you're planning, worrying, thinking about the future, catastrophizing, going into the worst case scenario. I don't know if this looks familiar to you all, but I know many people talk about insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night with so many things going through your mind, right? Did I lock the door? Bills, bills, bills. So, one thing I always tell my students is never believe anything you think in the middle of the night because it's always distorted, right? The next day you look at it, you think, why was I thinking that? Regardless, mindfulness is this invitation out of the past and out of the future into the present moment where there's typically, not always, but there's typically a sense of being okay, at ease, that we can learn to connect with. Mindfulness counteracts automaticity. Automaticity is that quality of going through life with just like an automatic pilot. And it's like we go through life and we miss our lives because we're so busy. We have so much that we're responsible for, and the day just goes. And that quality of like getting in the car, getting out of the car, and having no idea what happened in between. Right. So this is automaticity, living on automatic pilot. People who practice, I have a, it's like we're robots. People who practice mindfulness report more gratitude, more joy in life, more connection. I had a student who was a physician who said that he had lived on his street for 15 years until he took a mindfulness class. He didn't realize there were mountains at the end of the street. This is the quality of being checked out that mindfulness can kind of respond to and teach us how to be more present for life. Lastly, I want to say that mindfulness is something we already know and experience. So many of us have experienced in the midst of being out in nature, for instance, this feeling of being connected at home, at peace, or in the midst of athletic activity where you're just in that zone and you're really fully there with your body, or in the midst of creative activity where you're just, you're drawing, you're painting, you're singing, you're dancing. There's some way that we can feel so mindful, connected, present at home in our bodies and minds. When I think about children, I think about the way kids are so present, right? They're just really living in that present moment. I remember when my daughter, especially when she was very little, was like, we'd be walking down the street and she'd want to stop and look at every single bug along the way. And I'd want to get down the street, but she was just so present with the moment. So what I want to convey is that you were like that too. You were like that too. You were really mindful at one point or another. But then what happened? We grew up, we got older, we went through our difficulties in life, we went through our education, we lost touch with something that is really, in my view, a part of this fundamental human birthright. What it means to be a human being is that capacity to find a place of fundamental well-being inside ourselves. And this is available to all of us at any moment. So, with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can do the practice of mindfulness together. So, I'm going to invite you to just give it a try, all right? Because now we've sort of talked about it significantly. Now let's do it. Let's do the practice. So I just invite you to settle back in a way that is comfortable for you. And with your back somewhat upright. Now you may be anywhere right now. You might be on a bed. If you're on a bed, you might prop yourself up. If you're on a chair, just seated with your back upright, but not too rigid or tight, just so you're comfortable. Your feet on the ground, your hands resting wherever they're comfortable. And by the way, you can have the screen on or screen off, depending whatever feels most comfortable to you. And your eyes can be closed. Although, if you don't want to do that, that's also fine. You can keep them open, just have them not looking all around the room, just downward facing. And let's begin by taking a few deep breaths. And as we take a few deep breaths, if you can allow yourself to settle a little bit, and just finding a way of inviting in the possibility of relaxation. Coming more fully into this present moment. And we can feel our feet on the floor. And as you notice your feet on the floor, you might feel the touch, the hardness, the warmth, vibration, tingling, coolness. Just notice that connection with the floor. And as your feet are on the ground, see if you can just in some way sense the ground below you, even if it's many stories down. Let's see how your feet are held on the earth. So we sense our physical feet and then just have a kind of sense of the ground below us. And you might even notice your thighs on the chair or couch bed and the way the furniture is holding you and the furniture itself is connected to the ground. So take a few breaths and really feel that ground. And this is a practice that I've been doing a lot these days when my mind gets a little anxious or worried, sad. I remember to connect with the ground beneath my feet. And it could just be the simple act of feeling my feet on the ground, just feeling the heaviness, hardness, softness, or sensing the earth below. And then notice your hands, let your hands be soft. Notice your torso, feeling your back against the furniture. Notice your stomach area. Let your stomach be soft, just allowing it to soften. We often hold a lot of tension in our stomach area, so allowing it to soften. Noticing your shoulders. Relax. And noticing your throat and neck, jaw, softening your jaw, your face and facial muscles. And now notice your whole body present here, your whole body present here. Just letting yourself be for one moment. We spend so much of our day doing, doing, doing. We've forgotten how to be. Just letting yourself rest here. And now turn your attention to the sounds around you. There's sounds in the room, outside the room, sound of my voice. Let the sounds come and go. Listen to the sounds as if you were listening to your favorite music with curiosity and openness. And now bring your attention into your body, feeling your body breathing. Can you notice that your body is breathing without you doing anything in particular? You might notice your abdomen rising and falling, expanding and contracting with each breath. At this point, your breath can be at its own natural rhythm. No need to lengthen it or shorten it. Just let it do whatever it's doing. And you can feel your chest rising and falling, expanding and contracting. Or you might notice the air moving through your nose, in, out, tingling, warmth. It's helpful in this meditation to have something to focus on. So it could be your breath in your abdomen, your chest, or your nose. Or if you liked listening to sounds, it could even be continuing to notice the sensations at your feet that are changing. Choose whichever is the clearest or the easiest or the one you're drawn to. If you're not sure, they all work equally well, so just choose one. And now we're going to begin the process of noticing moment after moment, breath after breath, or sound or sensation after sound or sensation. When breath ends, the next breath begins. As you do this, you might notice that your attention begins to wander. You start thinking about other things, planning, remembering, imagining. When this happens, you're not doing anything wrong. It's completely normal. When you notice your attention has wandered, you can say a soft word in your mind like thinking or wandering, and then gently redirect your attention back to your main focus, whatever it was, breath, sound, or sensation at your feet. Other things may happen if they're in the background, just let them stay in the background, like maybe a sound pulls you away or an emotion or you get sleepy. If it's in the background, let it stay in the background. If it becomes really strong, you can notice it, include it in your meditation for a moment, acknowledge it, feel it, sense it, and go back to the thing you were focusing on. So let's give it a try on our own just for a couple of minutes without me talking. So let's now notice how our body is doing as we bring this meditation to a close. Just noticing how your body is feeling. Are you more relaxed, more at ease? You may or may not be, but just to notice. How about your mind? Does your mind feel more alert, more present? Is it sleepy? Is it, or just what's happening for you? If you are feeling more peaceful, really enjoy that quality, enjoy that it's present. If you're feeling something other than that, that's okay. Let whatever is here be here. It's just part of what's happening in this present moment, and we can be aware of it. We can be mindful of it. So let's bring our attention one last time to our feet on the ground. Feel that connection, and whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes or end the meditation. Well, thank you for your practice. Um, this is what we just did was a fundamental mindfulness practice. It's kind of the one that I teach people in the beginning to get started. But of course, one can do this continually for a long period of time. And I just want to say, and okay, while I'm doing this, I want to hear from you what your experience was like. So you can put it into the chat. I want to say one thing and then, or you can either come on screen or put it in the chat, but I'd love to hear what your experience was like and or um, questions that arose as you did that. What I did want to say is that um, mindfulness may not be for everybody. For some people, mindfulness is just, it feels really great. They love to do it, or they're really curious about it, interested about it, enjoying it. And others might feel like it's not for them. And just like there's no medication that works for everybody, it's the same with meditation. Some people connect and some people don't. So if you didn't, that's fine. So yeah, so was your experience like, and any questions you might have based on what we just did? And I see that someone's raised their hands. Such a
Yeah.
great question. I don't actually know the scientific answer to that because there probably are breath scientists who are really looking at that. Like, is it the breath calming that impacts the mind, or as the mind calms, the breath calms itself? That's kind of what you're asking, right? My experience, and so mine is experiential, not a scientific response, is that it's both. Both seem to be true. That as we deliberately work to calm our breath, it allows our mind to calm and settle. And also with a calm mind, it seems to impact our breathing. I tend not to encourage people to do that because usually what happens is you write something down and then another thing pops in, you start writing another thing down. But you have to know yourself, right? If it really truly actually helps you stay present, then it's not the worst thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but what I think, a couple of things. First of all, I just want to say for everybody, especially if you're new to this, our minds wandering is normal. This is what minds do. It's actually a sign of your intelligence. It's a sign of our species intelligence. We have survived as a species by searching for threats, right? We have a mind that is just distracted. It needs to be distracted. That's how we escaped the saber-toothed tigers many, thousands of years ago. So when we sit down to meditate, having a mind that is racing around and thinking about all sorts of things is a normal thing. So it's not like your failure, even if you've been trying this for 20 years and that's what your mind has been doing. It's just we just sort of, okay, that's what's happening, and then we train it to come back again and again. And so I just encourage you not to be discouraged. And you also might see what happens, Susan, if you try a little bit more wide open, spacious practice, because sometimes the mind doesn't want to be corralled. But instead, if you were to do like the hearing meditation and just notice the hearing, notice the thoughts, you might be able to do this at this point since you have a background. And it may just be that you need a more spacious practice. And I'm giving it a try. My second book is more about that type of practice. So take a look at it. It's Little Book of Being. what we did today, what I think like most people do when we first get started, is try to focus our attention on something like our breath, right? That's what I was having us do. A spacious practice is not having a focus, but allowing ourselves to notice multiple things that are happening. And maybe we just give that a try, see what happens. I'm going to look here at the chat. Joanna said, notice some self-judgment for me. Wondering if you recommend we replace that with gratitude or say something like presence or something else. Yeah, so Joanna, the having self-judgment arise is also very normal. Most of us have a pretty big inner critic that shows up in life and then shows up in meditation. Oh, you're not doing a good job. How come you didn't? I know, whatever the thoughts are, or you start judging yourself for something else that's happening in your life. I really failed at work, or I hate the way I look, or something like that. So, first of all, I want to say good job for noticing it. That's great that you saw that there was this inner critic arising. And mindfulness is used significantly in working to help us with the inner critic. In fact, there's an entire program that's out there called Mindful Self-Compassion. It's a wonderful program for working with the inner critic. So I recommend you might take a look at that. It's called MSC, or Mindful Self-Compassion. But the basic idea is that we notice those voices and using our mindfulness and not get entangled in it, like judging. You can even say it, you can give it a label, inner critic. And as you recognize that, it stops having a hold on us. And then we also do work to build up a feeling of kindness for ourselves. And there are other practices associated with mindfulness where we develop kindness practice. And maybe I'll do a tiny bit of that before we end today. Just checking the things. All right. I see someone was responding to Catherine regarding the breath, and you can look at that message. Someone's cat was joining in, and being on my lap is proof of the quality of the peaceful energy. Thank you, Diana. How long do you need to meditate for each day? What if it's sporadic? Does that help? Still help at all? I recommend just starting out with a little bit at a time. Like 5 minutes a day is enough to get started for those who are just starting out. We can all fit 5 minutes a day into our life. And then as we start to go, oh, I like this. This is making a difference. Then we might want to increase it. So let me just go back to my PowerPoint because I had a few slides related to this. And I do want to share some resources. And then I do see a question about parenting a teenager. Actually, the truth is she's a preteen. She's not a teenager. She's only 11. So I have zero wisdom about parenting a teenager, but I can give you some general parenting for preteen before we end. But let me share with you some of the resources and about continuing on and so forth. As I said here, starting with 5 minutes a day is great. Finding a place in your home that you're going to be not so disturbed is helpful, and just try to do it on a regular basis. And of course, there'll be days that you won't be able to do it, and that's absolutely fine. Just do it again the next day. I'm going to give you a resource of our app, our website at UCLA, and we also have an app with tons of meditations on it, including a 5-minute one, a 10-minute one, a 12-minute one. There's lots to do, lots of 30-minute ones with many different themes. So I'll give you that resource before we end. I wanted to share that mindfulness is a type of meditation. So there's hundreds of types of meditations, just like there's hundreds of types of sports. So any meditation, they all have different goals, different purposes. Mindfulness is the one I focus on, but whatever you do that supports you in this time for self-care, including any other type of meditation, I highly, highly recommend. I think because we don't have enough time, I just want to share with you that mindfulness is a meditation practice. It's also a quality of attention that we could have at any moment, so that if you want to bring mindfulness into your day, you can be mindful not just when you meditate, but when you're walking, when you're about to yell at your child, you take a mindful pause, a breath. When you are eating, you can bring mindfulness, noticing the taste of the food. When you're showering, there's so many ways of bringing mindfulness into our daily life. And this is just very quickly an acronym: STOP, take a breath, observe, and proceed. When you know that you want to bring mindfulness, just remember to stop, take a breath, Then observe what's happening inside me, at which point you then can proceed with more mindfulness. So I'm giving these resources. I was getting to all right, let me just do that. Our center at UCLA teaches mindfulness across the campus and also worldwide. And of course, right now, everything is virtual. And we offer many, many classes and programs and events that you're welcome to join. We do education, research. We have free meditations. I teach most Thursdays at 12:30 at the Hammer Museum. So this is free drop-ins Mondays and Thursdays, free mindfulness audio, live, online, and pre-recorded classes. This is our app, UCLA Mindful. It's in all the stores, and it's just a free resource for you. And of course, there are many apps out there, and I know, and it's hard to figure out which one to do. So you want to figure out like which teacher do I respond to? What voice do I like? Which one? How does it affect me? That's a way of deciding which app you want to do. I mentioned some of our books, Fully Present, and Ingo was mentioning them, and that's my little book of being that just came out last year. And then those are the resources this is the website, uclahealth.org/Mark. Now, I'm going to stop the share because I want to make sure I have enough time, hopefully. Let's see. So I want to answer the teenager question. I want to give 2 minutes of the kindness meditation, and I know I have to end in a few minutes. So in terms of parenting a kid, and I'll just say as a preteen, with a preteen, for me, managing and regulating my emotions has been like the number one thing that mindfulness does for me. So when I'm about to yell at her, I remember to pause, I remember to stop, take a breath, observe, proceed. When I notice that I'm getting irritated, when I'm feeling anxious about her, when any of the emotions that arise can lead to, it can be a perfect moment to practice mindfulness. And so, so there's just practicing it in the moment. There's also noticing my mind and my expectations and how I want her to be a certain way and wanting her, why isn't she doing this particular thing? Because that's what I want her to do. Noticing my expectations and coming back to center into the present moment to just be with myself and go, she's her own person. Let her be who she is. You love to read. She doesn't love to read. So what? She's her. She doesn't have to be you. So it's managing my mind and my heart, my emotions is one of the most helpful things I can do with my child at any age, right? At any age. It doesn't matter what age these children are, including grown ones. So let's just close with this short kindness meditation. I just invite you to settle back once again, taking a breath or two. Notice how you're feeling as we bring this session to a close. And let's see if you can offer a little bit of kindness to yourself in whatever way makes sense to you. You might imagine someone you love just bringing you kindness, sharing kindness. You might imagine your dog or cat curling up in your lap, being kind. You might imagine just think, what are you grateful for these days? What do you appreciate yourself for right now? And so just appreciating yourself for the fact that you attended this program, that you are building up self-care practices, learning the cultivation of more kindness, helping your health, your mental health, physical health. And let's send kindness out into the world. May everyone be at ease, peaceful, joyful, connected. Our world so deeply needs our compassion in this moment. I'm going to ring my bell to signal the end of the session.